Okay. Hello and welcome, folks. This is your GM in the Great Barrier, broadcasting from the center of your entertainment galaxy. And we are still doing something, we're doing something a little different tonight. For those watching the stream, you might notice that we're down a few players. And by that, I mean all but our Klingon players. Tonight, since we couldn't bring you a full experience, we're just going to do a pretty simple Q&A stream. So tonight with us we have our captain player Baloq, who also goes by, better known as
Baloq.
Baloq, better known as Taboq of the House of Qord, and our own Azik Korgh, Joe Overland Gamer, whom you should totally check out on Twitch and follow on Twitter if memory serves. It's Overland Gaming, is it?
Yep, Overland Gamer. We're on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So, and of course, before we get in here, the players are going to be leading this a little bit more tonight, at least at first here, with some questions. Before we get into that, though, just the usual bit of promotion here. First and foremost, and for those that want to catch the archive of our complete episodes, both for Broken Sword and Star Trek Adventures Aegis, the Saturday game that is set in the 22nd century, following more the prequel era of Enterprise. That complete archive is up there. And for those otherwise wanting updates on how the rest of this goes, or rather any news as pertains to either campaign, other situations, things of that nature, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link to the Twitter and chat, so feel free to check us out if it ever comes up. But with that all said, I think that, yeah, tonight we are going to steer into. I think it's best we just get straight into the interview mode. So I'm going to start by steering this off to our own Mr. Korg. Joe, take it away here.
It started as a signal from the Klingon Empire into the vast universe of the web. 5 would answer the call, joined later by a 6th. Star Trek Adventures Broken Sword brought a couple of Klingons, a couple of Gorn, a Kzinti, and eventually a Trill together to form a crew to a Klingon ship. Our mission is simple. Come together, play Star Trek Adventures based in the Klingon Empire, live stream the show on Twitch, and YouTube it into the archives. Tonight's episode of Star Trek Adventures Broken Sword is a little different as we pull back the curtain and take a look at a few of the folks behind the screen. I'm joined by our GM and our captain for tonight's episode for a little sort of round table discussion. First of all, Star Trek Adventures is a 2D20 tabletop role-playing game from Modiphius Entertainment. 2D20 is considered a roll-low system, the simplified version of the rules in Star Trek Adventures. When a player wants to do a task, they choose an attribute, choose a discipline, adding those together, and that becomes the target number the player wants to roll below. Each roll below generates 1 success. A task will have a sliding difficulty, so a 0 task is a super simple task, and a task of 6 is an extremely difficult task. If a player rolls above the task difficulty, they generate the meta currency of momentum they can spend later. If the GM rolls above, they generate threat. There is a bit more to the game, but that's a very, very, very brief, and I probably butchered it, of the kind of a look at the rules. Majority of the games now focus on the Federation side of things, but there is a Klingon core book and a couple of adventures on the Modiphius website that focus on the Klingon Empire. So check out modiphius.com, the Modiphius store. If you're shopping there, make sure you're in the US or UK region store for better shipping to your region. It can be kind of tricky to see which ones you're on because it's not linked, which is weird. So let's first of all thank you both for being here and giving me the opportunity to kind of interview you guys and talk to you a little bit. Let's start with our GM. How did you get into tabletop gaming or role playing?
Oh, thank you so much, Joe. And let me first say I appreciate the chance to chat a bit about the hobby, and certainly to any extent we can spread it around or let other people know, I'm always happy to bring it in. Um, so far as tabletop gaming goes, I've had kind of a on and off, very small and brief kind of dabbles in over the years up until a certain point. I actually owe my first sustained experience to it uh, to one of my oldest and closest friends, someone who is actually from time to who also streams, and I would quickly give a shout out to them, Crane Arts. They do a great many things on their own channel, just as that side blurb here. They've, I think, have been playing Spyro recently. They're going through their game series. Uh, they also commission art, for whom I owe both the old version of my avatar and the current one, of which you are seeing a little bit now if you're watching on the screen, and it's attached to every profile I've got as well. Um, but that is all beside the point. Among other things, she invited me to my first sustained tabletop experience. It was with the Dragon Age engine, and I was allowed to play a dwarf warrior by the name of Roshek, who persistently lacked cunning, was a bit of an elitist, and otherwise was just marginally useful in combat. And it was just tremendously fun experience. It was my first tabletop campaign in general. It was the first one that actually introduced me to playing with Roll20, which is what I use to host all the tabletop that I do. Um, and it was an experience. It was something that helped like give me a bit of a foundation for the experience, or a bit of the hobby. It made me very interested to learn more, and in particular to search out for systems. I'd already tried to dabble a little bit during that time with the FASA game engine, so that was well, for me that was a bit of a disaster, but it was part of what gave me the guidance in order to get into Modifius as well. Because my experience with that campaign, once I became it was around 2016, 2017 that the campaign wrapped up, and by that time I decided that I was interested in trying to pick up that engine and run some good old fashioned Star Trek tabletop. So that's kind of how it's been for, geez, I've been running campaigns now with this engine for over, yeah, 4.5 years at this point.
What was it like discovering the Star Trek adventures over some of the other systems that you had options for?
Well, compared to what I had been able to find, I honestly I found that it was pretty intuitive. It took a little bit of time to grasp some of the more extensive rules, or like mechanics to work with talents effectively and what have you. But the 2D20 system is, once you understand the basic premise, it gets very easy to pick up very fast. And I found that in terms of designing mechanics, I was able to work with that pretty easily on a pretty short basis. And I have to say, I really commend the people at Modifius for putting the effort that they did. And I was lucky enough to grab like the uh, collector's edition um, of the core rulebook when that first came out. It came with the nice little map of the alpha and beta quadrants that some pretty gorgeous artwork with uh, I think Federation and Romulan ships facing off. It's even got the little division colored bookmarks and all that. But even like for the standard core rule book, it's just lovely work, helping not just to provide a stable basis for mechanics, but also gorgeous artwork, nice little vignettes into the system and into Star Trek lore, which I think really helps make it more approachable, as well as you know, giving nice little nods to the fans as well.
That's been one of the things that we've discovered with the eye catching for people walking by at our friendly local game store. Um, is the artwork really draws people in, even if they're not fans of TTRPGs, they'll really get a kick out of the dedication it takes to put the books together and stuff. So, how did you get up the courage to become a GM?
Well, the very first instance, which I gave a very slight allusion to earlier, and Crane will recall some of this if and when she hears this, was a lot of enthusiasm, a small degree of planning, or at least a vague sense of narrative construction, but a very loose grasp on the rules, which ended in disaster. And after that, after the mechanics I struggled with initially, back when I was attempting to use the FASA engine, um, I decided never again, but only to the like difficult nature of understanding like how the plot was, or rather the mechanic bit. I always wanted to be sharper, so I never exactly had that particular problem again. Beyond that, I would say that for whatever social anxieties I might have, public speaking has not really been one of them, or it's not something that I've dealt with as much over the years. A bit of my background, I used to be actually in competitive public speech and debate. Uh, Nearly a decade's worth of competition experience, and about half that added on top of it as a coach in different capacities and levels. So I'm fairly used at least to working either with prepared material, a bit with impromptu material. Some of the narrative elements, one might say, are a little newer, but that's less of an issue. Um, so once I came in with that background, and once I had that particular disaster at the start, it was just an issue of, you know, making myself comfortable enough with the system, which, as we've established, is pretty intuitive, and then trying to pull together different groups on this, which it's been it's been a process definitely to find people to play. It worked out for me over these past few years. I had a couple groups that went for as long as groups that started way back when and continue to this day. Um, I guess the last dimension of that would actually be making the jump to streaming, which I wanted to do for a while because I wanted to tell particular stories, and I liked being able to share that among my players, but I wanted to be able to see that go out a bit more, at least have the possibility of giving more people insight into some stories, maybe share in that bit of fun, make a small little interesting mark. On that end, I would say I particularly would like to give a nod to those that have done it for me quite well beforehand. Of course, you've got the big crews like Shield of Tomorrow and everything that Eric Campbell did. Um, Also, streamers like ELH Mark One and I believe McCall 1337. Um, with their particular Star Trek Adventures series, one of which I was a part of for a little while. But yeah, that desire to tell the story, it was enough to eventually helped get me out to this point. Definitely a lot of nerves that first time, and man, did it show in the technical setup with that particular stream back at the start of Aegis. But it was a process and it was an evolution, I'd say.
Um, what's that kind of dives into some of the challenges you had with becoming a GM. Do you prefer being a GM versus being a player?
Honestly, I can't remember quite what the. It has been so long since I have been back in the annals of play that I can scarcely remember it now. Um, but yeah, no, I would certainly love the opportunity to be a player. And if opportunities emerged where I have the time to commit things, and where I'd otherwise found a system that was interesting, then I'd go for it. Um, Honestly, the major constraint there is that I am not a solitary individual. I'm quite happily married, and my wife does share in the hobby, but in
Oh,
a
you lucky
not.
stiff.
Sorry.
I said, you lucky stiff.
Yes, 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 yes. Lucky me. Very lucky me. Um, but yeah, that's a hobby that I would prefer that we share in. That we both work, and this is also a bit of a time commitment for the two campaigns I'm running. So it would be preferable that we have something we could do together, and it's we'd think better to do off stream. But those opportunities have just been so few and far between. So on the other hand, I feel like I have a lot of stories to tell, or at least I have some stories to tell. That it's more a question of how much can I effectively manage on my plate, and uh, you know how slow of a drip do I want to manage things. So I'm quite content in this route here, especially when I get to meet some interesting people. Um, Also, if you don't mind, Joe, I might take an aside for a moment just to clarify something with one of our friends in chat here. Galaxian5 is asking about the nature of the disaster. Specifically, I presume as far as how my first session went. So I might
Go
take
for
that.
it.
Yeah. So this my first foray into actually running a tabletop game, I attempted to use the very old-fashioned Facet game, which I'd located a manual online. I made efforts to find find it at like nearby stores or something else, and couldn't locate it. And I felt like I had a reasonable grasp on most of the rules, but as I was trying to construct role macros, I started realizing, I feel like there are some gaps here. What am I missing? I'll I'll figure that out as I go. And as I did that, I started writing up a scenario for it, which the actual plot was in one of my favorite eras to work in, the prequel era, specifically in the years after, just after the start of the Federation, end of the Romulan War, working with your NX classes, your Daedalus classes. My particular hero ship was for that game was the USS Lovell, one of the Daedalus class vessels, which, for those unfamiliar, it is the conical primary hull instead of a saucer with the tubes for the main hull or the warp nacelles. For those watching, I might put it up here. Um, it was basically a battle drill scenario between the hero ship and the starship Franklin of as mentioned in Star Trek Beyond, Balthazar Edison, Crawl for those that come later. Um, and it was they have an initial match, they vanish, and then there are aliens that are involved from the Enterprise series that wind up causing the Franklin crew some trouble when they get separated for a time. Everything was going decently well with that up until we actually got into combat, and I realized that I had missed some mechanics very badly, and or very specifically, that some like macros just to use basic stats that I had not written, and I felt awful. We worked out something very quickly, and I had to thumb through the book a little bit, so it was a very rough time. Gameplay came to a virtual standstill for minutes, and it was just an absolutely awful situation. But we bounced back. The crew was game to continue, and they put up with my shenanigans, so I appreciate them to no end.
That's pretty sweet. Taboq, I'm going to hand the mic over to you. If you have any questions, feel free to.
I just had one
in.
for our friendly GM here. I was just curious what other systems you've ever played in, not necessarily run, but having played in.
Certainly. So I will say, of course, I have played a very little bit of Star Trek Adventures from the player perspective. So that was a small thing. I started out with Dragon Age, as I've mentioned, but otherwise, it's been all very brief experiences. The next one out would have been Shadowrun, which was a particularly fun little thing. I got to play a neurotic. I believe the class is called Rigger, basically a drone user. In this case,
Which edition?
I don't know, honestly. It might have been fourth edition, or what's
Oh my. Okay.
what's even I don't even know what's I'm so like
I do believe
quasi
current edition is 6.
okay, maybe it was 5 then. I don't know. Um, but yes, I just remember that I got to play a man with a swarm of mechanical bees, and it was very fun. I was hoping to bring it out, and the initial inspiration was actually the clip of Dale Gribble from King of the Hill throwing pocket sand in somebody's face. I had the thought of just having essentially, with the idea
Pocket
being
drone?
yes. The idea being that in the backstory, for those unfamiliar with Shadowrun, it is kind of a magic cyberpunk type scenario where magic happens.
Picture cyberpunk meets D&D.
Yes, precisely. When magic, suddenly came into the world at this future point and created all the issues, I decided as part of the lore to say that one of the things it did was to hasten the demise of honeybee populations, such that the megacorps that gained increasing power, they decided to make artificial bees in order to maintain some degree of pollination, and that my character basically was somebody that in real life they were, or rather in their public life, they were a maintenance tech that would work on these little bee drones, and every so often there'd be something defective. I'd take them aside, and you know nominally they would be disposed of, but in fact they would just be repaired, and um, they could be kept on my person for personal defense or for broader use. They could be used basically as a small long range, low visibility drone to dispense poisons, or rather venoms, or otherwise poison foods, drinks, something like that. I could be contract killing, surveillance, anything like that. And I went by the beekeeper.
That's
Very
awesome.
cool.
And
Yeah.
now we know where Arrow got their villain from. Because I don't know if you remember, there was a villain who the actress was also on Walking Dead, who played something very similar to that. So that's really cool.
Huh.
I was about to ask which villain. There are so many.
I still need to. I made it up to a point in the Arrowverse, and I haven't continued watching, which is a real shame because I want to. From the bits I've seen of Legends of Tomorrow, I actually want to watch that show, and I've been perfectly okay with Flash. Arrow proper is the kind of the difficult one for me right now.
I think it is for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
I got to the 5th season when there were no more flashbacks to be had, and I sort of lost interest in that one myself.
Oh, good. That stops then.
Yes,
It slows up.
Because by that point, when you're flashing back 5 years into the past, and you get to 5th season, 5 years into the past is first season, or whatever. It was an interesting story mechanism
No.
and storytelling mechanism, but it was annoying to me anyway.
No.
Stephen Amell is actually on my list of an answer to a question I will ask later. So this will be fun. We'll take a step back just for time being, and while the GM sets the foundation and the framework for the stories that we get to play in, it's the players who are absolutely blessed, or in some cases face palming, the ability to play in it. Our captain, Taboq, is one of such characters. I'm Azik, the wannabe helmsman.
No, you are the helmsman. You're the wannabe captain.
That's right. I'm the wannabe able to land the ship if the dice would let me do it.
Yeah. So far, I think you've crashed into all the planets we've landed on.
So
to be fair, one of them was a starship.
That's true.
In the atmosphere. Yeah, great. Close enough.
So, Captain, and I'm going to refer to you as Captain because, out of respect, Azik cannot refer to you as anything else. How did you get into the tabletop gaming?
Oh my god. I've been doing this craziness for 40 years. I started when I was 11 with the old red boxed set that I got as a Christmas gift from my parents. Played through that, got into advanced D&D. When I say red box set, I mean the old basic set for Dungeons and Dragons. Let's see, got into advanced D&D, second edition. I've been through all of the editions of Dungeons and Dragons except for 4th edition, which I just despised the entire system because they tried to turn it into an MMO, and thankfully that didn't last very long. 5th edition of D&D, I have a love-hate relationship. I love how many new people it's brought into the hobby. I hate the rule system. That's just me, though. I have played lots and lots of systems, lots of games. I've played most of the stuff that Palladium Books put out, seeing as it all uses the same universal system. That was pretty easy. That stuff being Rifts, Robotech, Beyond the Supernatural, Ninjas and Super Spies. Those were all entertaining. The problem with of course playing Rifts is if you take all of the rule books and stack them on top of each other, you have a pile 6.5 feet tall. So you got to pick and choose with your source material really closely. I am a forever GM. I am always, as the saying goes, behind the screen. I asked what edition of Shadowrun you were talking about, because I played 1st edition when it first came out, and with my player group, yep, I had to GM. I had to start playing that game as the GM with 1st edition, which was a crazy, crazy version of the game. I've been involved with the third-party publishing aspect of gaming since What did I say? I've been involved in the third-party publishing. Yeah, there we go. Since the third edition of D&D came out with the open game license, so I've been editing, proofreading, drawing maps, doing illustrations, writing, and publishing all over the place. So, yeah, this is kind of my modus operandi. I'm kind of stuck in it. I think I will never get out of it. God's whatever gods there may be willing.
What's your favorite system to either run or play?
The D20 system. You know, with third edition of D&D basically established. Boom! Here's a system, D20 system. Fact of the matter is, I'm writing my own version of the D20 system, where I'm trying to streamline a lot of the rules. And so far, the most complex thing is character creation, because with the character creation system I've come up with so far, which is going to be getting some very serious playtesting next year, you end up with a fully realized character with a backstory and a life before you, the player, took him over. Yeah, but the D20 system, it can be used for anything if you've got the creativity and the ability to explain it to people. But 2 years ago, I finished up a campaign. He was using the D20 modern system, which was basically just using the D&D rules for supernatural stuff or magic stuff or whatever today. That campaign ran for 8 years.
Oh wow.
That's impressive.
See, it ran for 8 years using the D20 rule set. And a lot of modifications just to make it work for me and for my players. 8 years. I had to end it because one of my players was leaving and moving several states away, and there was no way we could continue online at that point. But yeah, when I start a campaign, I have an end for it, but I never actually plan on getting there. So I had to wrap things up. I've tried to explain that campaign to my youngest son. He's 14, and the longer I explained it, the more crazy it started to sound. And then what kept running through my head was, it made sense at the time.
They do be like that though. I honestly the experience of landing a campaign and actually getting it to a conclusion you can accept is I wonder how some GMs can pull it off. I wonder sometimes how people can pull it off in a year or so, because I've seen that happen. I've been in one of them and it was crazy. I don't know. How do you feel when it comes to it like landing those campaigns or getting them actually set up, or rather, like trying to wield that conclusion in that sense? So
What, try to bring it to a close?
yeah.
You mean? Well, it's like I run my games sort of like when I write fiction. Um, I know where I'm starting, and I know where I want to end. I just don't know how I'm going to get there.
Mm.
I also run very player-driven games. Like, I want them to have the agency to steer the story. Like it's like their decisions are going to change my plans for the things that I had set up and ready to go for them. I have a whole list of rules on how to be a GM, and one of my rules is always listen to your players. That's true on several different levels. Mainly, you listen to them and you take ideas from what they're saying back and forth to each other. You know, because that's several other brains at the table doing your own thinking for you.
Couldn't
So
agree more.
the idea is to take full advantage of that. There are times I'll give them puzzles. I have no idea how they're going to figure out the puzzle. until they come up with a clever way to figure out the puzzle. And then I just run with it at that point and smile and grin, and they have no idea that that is their own doing. You know, it is collaborative storytelling. So you can't just railroad them. You know, I mean, railroading is good if you're doing like a con, when you're doing a game that you have to resolve in 4 hours. That's a railroad right there. You cannot deviate from the story from that at all. If I have encounters in my games that they absolutely have to help move the story along, and they're not going anywhere near where I planned for them to happen, they're still going to happen wherever it is they end up. You know, I call it my string of pearls method. You know, it's like each pearl on the string is an encounter that they absolutely have to move the story along, and it doesn't matter where they go, but they're going to find it. I'm going to have to change some of the details, but I can make it work.
Yeah, certainly. I could not agree more.
And there you go. I mean, it's no real trick. You just, after doing it for 20 plus years, you kind of, it just becomes like second hand, not second hand, not even second rate.
Second nature.
Second nature. There's the word I was looking for. My brain is not working for me right now. Like I said, second nature entirely. You go with what you can get.
So do you prefer being a GM or being a player?
The sad thing is, I've been a player so little. I jump at the chance, any chance I can get. I'm not sure. As the GM, I love to weave the story, weave the plot, create new things. I mean, my current players in the D&D game, technically Pathfinder first edition game that I run on Friday nights, so far they haven't encountered a single monster out of the book. Because
that's awesome.
Well, every single one of my players in that group is also a very well skilled GM on their own. So I got to bring my A game first off, and secondly, I can't give them normal stuff because they all know everything. They know it all. I mean, I've teased them. They've been going through a massive dungeon I had to put together. And they've encountered all of the what's the word I'm looking for? They've encountered all of the traditional D&D monsters just in this one dungeon. Gelatinous cubes that are used to like clean the hallways. They ran into an entire room full of mimics. They just killed a rust monster. And they just ran into an illithid. So I gave them all of them. Boom, here you go in one dungeon, just to get it out of the way. But I have a tendency to do epic storytelling, and this current campaign is no different.
What's been your favorite part about, or the highlights of being able to play Star Trek Adventures?
Well, getting to know a new system is always entertaining. I regret to say I just haven't I haven't really had nor taken the time to pour through the rule book like I would normally would with any new system. But as our GM has said, the system is fairly intuitive. There's just some of the minor things, the side stuff aside from the main core mechanics that I really do need to delve into more. Character advancement, how ship combat works. Though thankfully we haven't gotten into ship combat again after the last disaster.
Yes, tutorial land, Klingon style.
Yep. But the best part about this whole thing is the insane crew that I happen to have. They are crazy. They are insane. I don't know how this is going to work as a crew, but we're going to make it work. Gosh dang it. And just the ridiculous die rolls and some of the abject, silly stuff that we have done has been the most entertaining thing above and beyond all else.
We do have a question in the Twitch chat. What 2D20 system would you like to, or game would you like to check out next? And I'm just gonna open up the stream chat questions to both of you. So have
Okay.
at it.
I have on my shelf the 2D20 Dune book. I picked that up and I didn't open it, and because it came out about a month before the movie did, and I didn't take that out of the plastic until after I had seen the movie twice because I didn't want any potential spoilers at all for what they were doing. But that's the only other 2D20 one that I have, and that one seems fairly interesting. That could be one that I would like to do.
Oh, I am genuinely uncertain on that. I know that I happen to have, just as a matter of principle, I know that I actually happen to have, from when Modifius was running a little promo, a free copy of the John Carter of Mars core rulebook somewhere. So
Oh,
That
yeah,
would be fun.
I'd consider revisiting that. I've between the proper Trek games that are running right now, and what I have planned, and something a little experimental, while still using this engine. I don't know honestly if or when I'll be able to get to it. It's quite a long road getting from here to there.
oh, you didn't.
Yeah, yes I did.
You that
Put a
oh
coin in
bad
the
GM,
Star Trek reference jar.
Yes.
bad GM. Ooh,
You may take
great.
a
I'm
point
gonna
of threat.
I'm gonna save this. We have a question about the player characters. I'm gonna save this one for just a bit before we get into the game, actual talking about the game. But we will get to it. Galaxian 5. We will get to that one. Why don't we go ahead and just dive into the game stuff? Captain, how did you come up with the idea for your character?
That was sort of I came up with two different ideas. Um, I forget which one I had originally applied for. Was it Aegis? GM?
I believe that you applied for Aegis first, and that during the second round of, rather, during my second wave of applicants, I don't know if I invited you to apply because I was impressed with what you had, or if you sent in an application independent of that. Because there were,
Well, I applied for Aegis. I think it was Aegis,
yes.
or whichever one didn't launch.
No, Aegis did in fact launch, and
Okay.
that airs here at twitch.tv /GM in the Great Barrier every 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturdays.
Good spot for a plug.
Yep.
Well, I applied and didn't make it for whatever reasons there were. Actually, I think it was you had Aegis going. You wanted to do a second one, and that second one was the one that didn't go anywhere.
The
Uh,
second campaign is in fact Broken Sword, and that has been going places.
no. There was one that you had wanted to get started that didn't. You didn't get enough takers, and then you went to do Broken Sword, and I jumped on that one like a targ on a tribble. Whichever. I applied for one, didn't get it, and then you came back to me and said, "I'm doing another one. Do you want to do that one?" And I said, "Yes." I'd wanted to do the engineer because as a third, okay, I was born 2 years after the original series went off the air. I was already a third generation Trekkie. Okay, I was doomed. No chance to get away. I was stuck in Star Trek, so I am fluent in Star Trek technobabble. I know how the systems work, so I wanted to play an engineer. And then we're working on my character. I was conferring an awful lot with the GM on this character. First, because I was brand new to the system, and secondly, I was trying to come up with an interesting character. So I went with the Kuha, the flat-headed Klingons. I really did enjoy his headcanon about why we've got this particular time, the Kuha, the the regular Klingons, and then the weirdo Discovery Klingons. I loved his headcanon so much that I enjoyed that, and I incorporated that into part of my background for the character. Um, yeah, I wanted to make an engineer. He was going to be crappy at combat, and he was going to be from a house that was just sort of falling apart. It sort of just built as I went through all of the tables. As I went through all of the options. I wanted to build a house, so I went through that system, and it all just sort of coagulated as I was going about it. Yeah, he's a terrible, terrible warrior, obviously, um, but he can make the ship work with a used tunic, with an old tunic can, a broken condom, and a tube of super glue. So, you know, and if it's not giving away too much, Mister GM, the fact that he was going to become captain was pretty much set in stone from the beginning.
No, I had a plan. I think it's safe to reveal at this point that we started the campaign with 2 engineers. I did not plan on that being the status quo for very long, and that uh, the situation was very much designed not just to quickly create the circumstances where you would want that captain off the board very quickly, whether by killing him or capturing him or whatever other possibilities emerged, but just to so thoroughly put you on the margins and out of your depth at that point. Yeah, that was much the situation. Another way of putting it, Baloq wanted to be an engineer. The monkey's paw curled in, and I said, "Granted." I do like doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I'm an engineer, but I'm also supposed to be captain. I'm a terrible, terrible combat-oriented character, and I'm the one in charge. And the only reason Taboq is still the captain is because the rest of the crew hasn't decided to kill him yet. They like him enough, which is odd, but
Azik is shorthanded to do so.
Oh.
Without spoiling too much of the upcoming games, how has the player's backstory influenced the creation of Broken Sword and your story up to this point?
Well, I would say that it has impacts both far-reaching and with sort of immediate implication. Certainly, the case with Taboq was very much that very much fit into the design of the tutorial or the introduction to the series, and that things like that work out very serendipitously. While of course I have a lot of plans for things that were to come or things that would happen regardless of what crew is here. I would say that the additions that the players have made with each of their story opportunities present the chance for quite a bit that I am plotting ahead to, both in terms of smaller personal stories that might be more of a one shot or might have like a character arc to broader implications across the series. Indeed, from their very start, the inclusion of some characters and some storylines has opened up a lot of the opened up quite a bit more than what I was initially looking at exploring, and some of their actions personally are already seeding developments
Hello?
that will impact things quite along the line.
Stuff what's going to get us killed later.
Yep.
So before you brought the crew together, how did you come up with the original idea for Broken Sword?
So Broken Sword really started out as kind of a bit of a world building exercise for me, and it grew out of two things. For one, there was an extended bit of time, particularly going through the pandemic, where things had been a bit difficult, and in particular, like in short, budget cuts had occurred. I'd lost my previous job, and there were few other opportunities for the time, so we were working on getting ourselves into a different position, or rather, we had something else that needed tended to. So during that time, I was kind of doing that, and it was tabletop in general. The creative process was a bit of escapism, um, but what particularly drove Broken Sword was thinking about the Klingon Empire in this particular era. I would say that as uh, I too have been a lifelong Trek fan. I was sealed very nearly from birth, and was just wowed by the Next Generation running, even at like a year old when I started watching, which was like midway through. And yes, I had absolutely no perception of what was going on, but when I was eventually able to speak, half my babbling would be Trek-related phrases. So my fate's been sealed.
Go ahead, make me feel old. Go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, the but as a eh, as a Trek fan, I will say that uh, I have had strong feelings about some of the newer fare. When Discovery launched, I was not particularly pleased with it, and criticism could go all around. I feel like design issues were a bit odd. Some narrative choices were a bit odd. I think the Mirror Universe was an absolute waste of time in season one. There's a lot, really too much to go into. But the fundamental thing that latched onto Broken Sword was um, I didn't particularly care for the portrayal of Klingons in, at the very least, season one of Discovery. I felt like the production decisions to make everything with that so alien, and not just that, but to set up the an empire that is in a very different state from what we see it in either the prequel series of Enterprise or the impressions we get of it from the original series on through those movies. One would expect, a relatively stable empire, or at least a state of affairs that treats them as a serious threat. And certainly there's been a lot of work in beta canon that dealt with that, which retroactively doesn't have the same hold. There was, obviously the FASA materials, and particularly how they detail the 4 Years' War. There are parts of the novelverse that discuss it. There are even some fan works that, for a time, I thought as something decent. I would say that I did draw just a hint of inspiration, and I've sprinkled a little bit of the Axanar fan work, which I, you know, I appreciated what it was when it was just a prelude, but the the state of affairs afterwards kind of caused me to sour a bit on that. Um, but nonetheless, there were good narrative ideas there, and so with Discovery, I thought, we have this just bizarre over design in terms of this very different look for the Klingons, and a weird sort of like needlessly sort of gothic alien sort of design for the ships. But we have this fairly bland and generic story for an empire that's divided. Like it's just now in a state where 26 great houses are dueling amongst themselves because reasons, or like the High Council and the Chancellor don't have the pull that they did. Apparently, the Imperial Navy doesn't quite exist in a form that it did, and yeah, it was all very confusing, was part of the point. So I came to this initially just thinking about the idea of, okay, how would I make this work? And that's where the beginnings of that idea take root. Thinking, well, in terms of the political situation, if we, in order to bridge Enterprise up through Discovery, there had to have been some fairly serious political upheavals, some shifts in the power dynamics. The houses steadily gained greater wealth and greater influence. You take into account the new look of the Klingons, and I would say that since we've established at this point through the series that there are canonical explanations for the Hemhuk and the Kuha, which for those uninitiated or for those that maybe don't recall right offhand, that is the Hemhuk are the uh, next generation style Klingons. Think like Worf, Martok, Gowron, Ridges, hair, mostly humanoid looking. Um, Whereas the original series, people back when they just could only afford to make them look a little swarthier, and I don't know, did they give Klingons in that era fangs? It's been
No,
a
they give shoe polish and goatees.
Yeah. So the shoe polish goatee and that sort of look for the old style Klingons. Those are the Kuha. Um, my thinking was maybe we established the Kuvat virus creates the Kuha, and obviously Klingons as a high and mighty species would look down upon these new brethren, viewing them as less as brothers and more as those that are afflicted or besmirched, made less pure in some way by this affiliation.
Which is canonical.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, that's definitely something that the shows allude to a bit. The beta canon gets into it a lot more, which I was quite eager to see. Um, but my thinking is that obviously trying to reverse the effects of the Kuvant virus would be one of the key missions of the Empire in that time. So maybe that process takes hold, but maybe it's not perfect to start off with. Maybe it starts off and has considerable side effects, and thus, you get people who are cured, which incidental shout out here to one of the most useful groups on Reddit for this campaign, the Klingon Language Institute Reddit.
Yeah,
Um,
I love these people.
they helped me coin the phrase Kohawi, which roughly translates to one who is happy again. The idea being that it's kind of the inclusion of Kuch, which would read as Quch. It's a play on the words very loosely to reference forehead, and for those that are the standard Klingons, the Hemhoch, they are the happy ones, is their foreheads are not deformed in their view, whereas the unhappy ones, the Hochach, are the flat forehead Klingons, and they are considered the unhappy ones. So the others are the ones who are happy again. They have been fixed. They have been, they have had their treatment, and they now are something closer to being, a standard Klingon. In some ways, they might view themselves to be more pure in terms of that. And, that has implications, of course. Part of it is that, when you suddenly have this when you have this treatment and you create this whole new subgroup, that's going to create social cleavages. The traditional Klingons are going to look at them and say, you might have undergone your fancy treatment, but you're not, you're still, who knows what sort of genetic material they drew from Kronos in order to get everything fixed there. The Kulha would be resentful of them when they can't access the treatment necessarily, and say, we can still attain honor without without undergoing this type of mutilation that you've gone through yourselves. And the Hamhoch, or rather the Kushkawi, or the Kuchawi, my Klingon needs a bit of work. With the Kuchawi, they are perfectly content to look down on both of them, and they're not going to take any questions to their honor. So that's having that basically represent, because this is an empire and this is not This is not the fully automated luxury gay space capitalism that the Federation is so lucky to have. Um, it's a situation where wealth inequality becomes part of the story, and thus the some Klingons suffer. There are definite haves and have-nots, and I thought it interesting to make this kind of an expression of part of that dynamic. The ships are big and strange Gothic cathedral-like things because the great houses are great and they have the wealth to make these big ships. They carry that look in the public-facing sort of thing because or that's the people they send to represent them for the Empire because they want to show off the wealth. That's uh, so that basically I just kept thinking about all these processes, and eventually I decided, well, shit, I can't not use this for something tabletop wise, especially when it might be marginally easier to bring something like this um, to a campaign or to create the visuals for this. So that's kind of basically where it came from.
That's pretty cool.
Mm.
All right, we're gonna ask Galaxian 5's question. We'll start with Captain, and then we'll do the GM here. If your player character was given their own command, what starship would they choose?
That's an interesting one. I don't know. I think it would depend on when and in what context. Taboq's main goal is to bring wealth and prosperity back to his house. His sire and his grandsire played havoc with what was once a very wealthy miner house. I think at this point, if he could just get if he could just get a ship that works properly, a modern he would want, considering the era they were in, he would want a modern ship that he could use to ply his trade yet again. His house they were a commercial house. They weren't a warrior house. They made money. I mean, that's, his family right now. One of the things that they do is they breed cats from Terra, because I'm sorry, Norwegian forest cats are really big, really furry, agents of death and destruction that Klingons would absolutely love. I'm sorry, they would put a Targ in its place. I mean, I've seen them, make bears run away. But yeah, he would just want something that he could help make his family prosperous yet again. So I'm not sure. Something Obviously something that's got a lot of cargo space on it. I mean, even Klingon cargo haulers are overly and overtly armed to the teeth, because that's just the way Klingons do things. Yeah, I think he would. What is that? Like the D5 cargo hauler? Is that one of those ships that they showed in?
That does in fact exist, or those
Yeah,
that space frame exists. It's from
yeah,
Enterprise.
and that's something that he would definitely not mind having. You know, in working order. He's not greedy. He's definitely not a greedy man. He just again wants to make his family prosperous yet again.
I think Azik would want to fly something along the lines of Chang's Bird of Prey from
The one that
like
could cloak.
yeah, one of the early ones that can cloak, because I mean, the fact that it's a prototype, it very much intrigues him, and that itch of to be a good driver.
Yeah, you need to work on being a good driver.
Yeah,
Definitely a good driver.
yeah. All right, Mr. GM, if you could, I guess across the eras that you enjoy, what ship would you want to command?
Well, I mean, first being in character, I should say I will take any ship just so long as you bring the ship Closer.
but,
Closer.
but
Nice.
excuse me, why does the GM need a starship?
To advance the plot.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, but no. So if I were just purely going off Klingon ships, if there were one that I wouldn't minded to have stumbled upon or found myself on, uh, I'd take the HMS Bounty. The temporally displaced GM could have found themselves in the 80s and accidentally crawled up the landing gear and discovered accidentally gone into the 23rd century with a pair of humpback whales and an unsuspecting crew, then I would have been that second surprise on board the ship. Provided I didn't drown in the ship as well.
Well,
Um,
that would kind of suck, yeah.
yeah, yeah, but no. Otherwise, in terms of another in terms of another like ship that I just like or have a fascination with, or if I were making a player character, I would not mind the idea of um, a some sort of mainline 23rd century crew involving, or rather 24th century crew on a Vorcha or even a Cavort. I know the Cavorts are just scaled up barrels, but I love I do like the aesthetic that has, and the Vorchas though those are just some impressive ships. I'd love me a battle cruiser for a character. Yeah. Going beyond that, there are other Starfleet vessels I'd give the personal shout out to. Honestly, the one that bears mentioning is my favorite ugly cute ship of all time. Or it's the ugly starship you love because it's or like you love it in spite of the fact or because of how it looks, and that distinction goes easily to one of the Daedalus class vessels. There's
Oh
a
God, yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
no. There's Aegis is the second full campaign I am playing with one because I love the ship so much, and I believe it deserves to be the hero.
There's another one of those. It's a I think it was the Bushnell class ship. It was a ship that was designed. Oh, it's just one of those third party designs that went and made its way around. Or Wasp class, that's what it was. Sorry. Um, it's a spherical hull, but it's got a tiny little secondary hull and three nacelles on it,
Mm.
and the decks are perpendicular to the axis of motion. Uh, it was like, according to the backstory that someone had written about this thing, it was uh, it was at a time. It was designed at a time when Starfleet was still trying to figure out where they want to go to with round primary or disc shapes or spherical shapes for their primary hulls. And the design was finally finalized, and that's when Starfleet Command went, we're going with discs. But
Yeah.
it, I was actually running us using the D20 system. I was running a Star Trek game for some of my friends, and that was the ship that they had just gotten. One of those. So I like worked on trying to do deck plans for the whole thing and got about halfway through, and that game sort of collapsed because we never got back to it. But if I had my choice, I would take that ship because then I could actually see what the heck it is I'm trying to design.
Fair enough. Yeah. I'm gonna tilt that broadened version of the question back to you there, Joe. If we opened it up to Starfleet ships and you could like you had a particular preference on that, is there anything that you'd prefer to serve on, or would you stay Klingon? How'd you do it?
It'd be a hard press between the Defiant class and
Mm.
the Reliant. especially with if the Stargazer. Granted, I know Picard's kind of a touchy subject, but the one thing they did really good with it is the ship design and the
I'll agree.
refit of the Stargazer. If that's any indication of how the Reliant would look, it'd be a hard press between the Reliant, the retrofit Reliant, or I guess upgraded fit. It wouldn't be a retrofit, or a Defiant would be the two ships I would go after, because I mean the Defiant's a tough little ship, and I absolutely love the storyline behind that with DS9. And the Reliant is just, it's one of my first memories of Star Trek with my dad, and I just fell in love with that ship, and yeah. So
I actually had back in the day, many moons ago. I had a pickup truck, little Toyota pickup truck, and I had decals done at the back end of the bed. I had USS Defiant with that registry number on my truck.
that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, and I had one, the little oval decals that they put everywhere to tell you, what's behind this panel. I had one of those put on the gas tank lid, so it said, fuel access port.
Yeah. Also, I see you there, Galaxian 5. Spherical hull solidarity.
Yay!
Yeah.
Roundies.
We are hitting the hour 20 mark, so I figure we'll end this with some generic Trek geeky questions. And this is for everybody. What's your favorite Star Trek episode from the entirety of the series? Could be a movie too.
Oh, goodness gracious. Sorry. Okay, the best Star Trek movie of all time is Wrath of Khan. That's definitely the best Star Trek movie. God. As far as favorite episode, I cannot remember the title of the episode, but it's DS9. They are in the middle of the Dominion War. Worf is the first officer on the Rotaran with
Soldiers of
Martok.
the Empire, I think.
That and Tor asks to be put on board that ship.
Oh no, different one then.
Yeah, Core, he's ancient at this point. He can't get his own ship. He is out of favor with the High Council. He's out of favor with Martok because he was the one who rubber stamped the no on Martok's application to the Klingon Academy. Martok came up through the ranks as a civilian on board a ship, and saved his captain, and he hates him. He hated Core, but Core ends up. It turns out he's kind of like losing his mind a little bit, like old age. Even on a Klingon, old age is kicking on, and they're trying to escape from like a dozen Jem'Hadar ships. And Worf goes, "All right, everybody, get everybody else out of the other ship that's part of our fleet, and you leave, and I'm going to take that ship, and I'll fight them and keep them busy long enough for you to get back across the border." And before he can do that, Core knocks him out. And Core is a Dahar master. He knows what he's doing. He's the only man on board that ship, and he takes on a fleet of Jem'Hadar attack ships. And I'm not going to say he wins, but he kicks their asses. And that whole episode is one that gets to me every time. I can't remember the name of it now, but that's my favorite episode of all Star Treks right there.
Once more onto the breach. That was it.
There. Oh, you looked it up. Okay, cool. Yes, that one. My second favorite is also DS9, also with Worf and Martok, but Martok has just been given the Rotaran again, and he's still dealing with his own PTSD, and gets help from Worf by stabbing him.
That was Soldiers of the Empire.
That's a brilliant episode as well. just a very good look into the Klingon psyche and how they function on board a starship. Your turn.
Okay. Oh, jeez. There are a few things that come by and like fluctuate. I would say that of recent things that have been in my mind are things where moments truly stick out. I would have to give it to, in particular, to Enterprise's United episode. So it's during the season 4 arc where Romulan drone ships first start showing up, and where they are aiming to sow discord between the different groups, try to kick off a war between like the Andorians and the Tellarites and other local powers. It's like through that whole arc that Archer is starting to weld together the like people that are constantly at each other's throats. Vulcans, humans, Tellarites, Andorians, and he has to do a few complicated things. There's at least one honor duel involved, among
For
other.
sure.
Yes, yes. Poor Jeffrey Coombs. But the moment that kind of sticks through to me at the end of United is after they've at least driven off the drone ship. They haven't destroyed it outright. Sadly, a part two has, or rather, a part three comes in that kind of falls off a little bit. But it was nice to see Andoria. That's an aside, though. At the end of the episode, Archer and T'Pol come in. There's a Tellarite ambassador. There's Shran. They talk about what's happened, and they realize maybe there's something more we can talk about here, and we were gonna have negotiations. Maybe we can still do them. And Archer's like, why not here? And as it zooms out, you get this shot of the four founding species of the Federation together. As it zooms out of the window, you see Enterprise amongst a fleet of Vulcans, Andorians, and Tellarites. There's a perfect swell of music, and just it is the first moment, like maybe not exactly the first, but the strongest moment in the show to that point that really gives you a sense of what this show is building towards, and it's some of the best use of the prequel component, or like of the prequel concept of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. The Enterprise had so much promise, and that the idiot in charge just screwed it all up.
Well,
This is the same guy who screwed up the Klingons in Enterprise. I mean, in Discovery.
uh, Brian Fuller was actually not.
Not him. I'm talking the executive
Oh,
at
Moonves. Oh,
Paramount. The executive who
well,
made changes just to do them. I
uh,
hate that guy.
not 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 quite. I think the production teams were very different at that point. Um,
Yeah,
and
well, that was the executive who made changes. He forced changes just because he could,
hmm,
and he was fired after they finished filming up to the uh, season one hiatus on Discovery.
hmm,
And when they came back, the show immediately got better.
hmm. Well, at any rate, Joe, let's turn that question back on to you here.
Yep.
And I feel like before we get into the conclusion, I feel like I should do my due diligence here and ask a little bit. Obviously, we'll get to the show question, but I am a little curious. So far as it goes, what would you say? Uh, what helped you kind of get to the idea of your character?
Well, I honestly I had just gotten done playing. I think I don't know if I had finished it yet or if I was in the process of it, playing through Horizon Forbidden West, which is the sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn. And there's a character in there that has one arm, and like about around that time, the idea of coming up with a Klingon character for the game kind of, it was percolating in my head, and I was trying to figure out how would a person with that kind of disability or struggle be received in the Klingon Empire? And so I kind of tweaked with the idea a little bit, trying to figure out his motivations after the injury occurred, and kind of just expanded on that. And the great thing that I found with the 2D20 system, and Captain hinted on it earlier, was the fact that the 2D20 system, if you go through the tables and go through the character generation, it's really intuitive to help you develop that story and that character arc, much like you see in the Palladium system. And that was something that just kind of helped to form more ideas about him, and whether he wanted to be a helmsman and what kind of helmsman. He kind of comes off as kind of a Tom Paris kind of thing, where he's kind of a hot shot, kind of a wild card. Not really. He's diehard for the Empire, but he doesn't entirely know what that entails. I kind of play it where his injury kind of caused him to go away from the Empire for a bit. And so his experience has been way outside of that. So it's been really fun to develop him and to see where he's going. And then to be able to play the Dekoth character as kind of just that substitute character was fun, because it's a polar opposite. He's the very stout, devout Klingon, the warrior, protect the captain at all costs, and so that's been fun. As far as favorite episodes go, there are two that kind of pop up, and they're Deep Space Nine episodes. Blood Oath is probably one of the top ones. That's the one where was it Koloth?
Korkang and Koloth.
Yeah, they take Jadzia off to reluctantly take Jadzia off to finish a Blood Oath, and that one was just fantastic. And the other one is more, I enjoy it because of the sheer humor of it, and that's the House of Qord.
Oh God, yes.
Because just we get to see a little bit of the Klingon Empire, and it's like, oh, he hands data pads to all the old Klingon warriors talking about numbers and figures.
Enough. Yes.
But
And
those
that's
two,
both of those amazing episodes.
that's the one thing about Deep Space Nine is and I loved it, and I hope if we ever get a Worf series where he goes back to Kronos, I know they've talked about it, or back to the Klingon Empire. I know they've talked about it.
He's been pushing that for years.
Yeah. I would love to see more of the Klingon Empire, and much of like what we're exploring in Stabs is just being able to see that perspective. We saw a little bit of the Romulan Empire in Picard after all that stuff happened with them, and there's still a lot of questions that I have as to how did we get to there, which I'm sure is probably in the novels somewhere. But it's one of those things I love seeing. I enjoy the Federation and all, but the Klingons will always have a special place in my heart for gameplay and for stories.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's one of the most well-developed non-human cultures, I think, in any fictional universe. I mean, aside from like Tolkien, but So,
You mentioned movies. I want to end with this one question.
mm-hmm.
And it's something I've done a poll on. Every couple of years, I'll do a poll on my Facebook page as to what movie has the best soundtrack.
Oh, Star Trek 6. Star Trek 6 has the best soundtrack out of all the Star Trek movies.
I mean, you can't just not say Cliff Idleman there. I mean, the thing that when it comes to Wrath of Khan or Search for Spock, they are so close to being the same soundtrack in many ways because he reused quite a few
Yeah.
musical notes. That honestly, it is very difficult because for me to make a comment there. Cliff Idleman definitely stands out, and honestly, Michael Giacchino's soundtracks have been one of the consistently solid and spectacular moments from the reboot movies. Um, and
Sorry, I just had a spasm. You mentioned the JJ verse.
hey, uh, you want to get into controversy here. I think that Star Trek Beyond might honestly have been. It is easily in one of my. It's probably one of my top 3 movies, and depending on the day, it might be my favorite.
Is that the third JJ verse movie?
That is the third of the Kelvin films.
That is actually a really, really good film, and that's because
Justin Lin and Simon Pegg and I think
Simon
Doug
Pegg
Young,
helped.
they all hit it out of the park there.
Yes, Simon
And
Pegg
Pine
is
did
a
a
real
fairly
Trekkie,
decent job.
and
Oh, that is.
he helped write a script. He helped write that beautiful, beautiful script. It was really well done.
Yeah, Beyond is among other things like the whole cast gave it their all and did quite well with it. Chris Pine's Kirk was at absolute peak performance in that one. That is my favorite rendition of his Kirk. And yeah, just everything about that film, the soundtrack, the production design is great. It plays like an extended original series episode in the best of senses.
Yes, yes. I mean, I do not. Sorry, I'm going to go off on a tangent like I always do. JJ verse movies. Um, while aside from the third one, the first 2 I had just major issues story wise with, but the actors themselves I have enjoyed thoroughly in their reimagining of the characters. They all did an amazing fucking job, and I applaud their efforts. I mean, what was it? It was Leonard Nimoy once said that when he was on set and he was watching Carl Urban portray Dr. McCoy, that he actually had to leave the set and because he was about to cry because he was like it was like watching DeForest Kelly again.
Yeah.
He's like watching my best friend again.
I was nervous with who was it? Quentin
Quinto.
Quinto.
Quinto?
Yeah. I was nervous with the way he was portraying Spock because prior to that, I had only had interactions with him in Heroes. Mm-hmm. So it was I was a little nervous about it, and then they brought in some of the emotion stuff, and that he really pulled that off really well.
He was fantastic as Spock. I mean, all of them did an amazing job. Even Zoe Saldana brought more life to Uhura than she was ever allowed to have before. You know, as much as I loved Nichelle Nichols, her, Walter Koenig, and George Takei, as actors, they were given very little to chew on for their characters. To me, that's always been disappointing. But Zoe Saldana did an amazing job of bringing life to her.
I think for my soundtrack, I think my favorite of all the movie soundtracks has to be First Contact. Just there's something about when that theme song comes on, and you know when they throw in, I don't know if it was ever on the actual album, but when they take enough care when Worf shows up and they have the Klingon theme pop up.
Just the real quick and quiet there.
Yeah. Dun, 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 and it's like, oh, this is awesome.
Oh god, yeah. Perhaps today is a good day to die. Robin Speed! Ah, shit, here we go again!
First Contact's definitely one of my favorite of the movies, and then next up would definitely be Undiscovered Country for soundtracks.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
I mean, just the opening theme, just that.
yep.
It's just
My,
like, ooh.
if I may say, when it comes to the musical notes or like moments on the cues in First Contact, I would say that my favorites focus on honestly the part of the plot that I enjoy the most, which is the First Contact story itself. And there's one where the gentle themes of it just work so well, and the particularly in the moment where Cochrane is with Riker and Geordi, and they've gone to warp. They're like, okay, time to stop and turn around, basically.
Yeah.
When they stop, and you get that like gentle bit of that flute followed by horns come in, and as they're
Yep.
turning the ship around, and Cochrane sees Earth, and it's like it's so
So
small,
small.
and it's a perfect metaphor for the not just for how it's like obviously Earth itself is about to get it, like when Riker says it's about to get a whole lot bigger, of course it's going to zoom in much closer for them, but how Earth is about to
He
go
meant
from this
metaphorically. Come on.
this traumatized backwater planet that's just been through horrific nuclear war and is about to like really truly earn its happy ending.
They really opened up the one-liners in that movie. It's almost because the what was it? Not Undiscovered Country. The one right before First Contact.
Generations.
Um, Generation. Thank you. They had a couple of lines in there, but it seemed like they kind of loosened up the belt a little bit with, like the when Riker kind of quips at Worf, it's like tough little ship, and then is
Oh.
little, and then not 2 seconds later, Worf is standing at the console, and he's like, "You do remember how to fire phasers?"
Well, Riker is always a dick, but
Yeah.
he's
Oh yeah.
he's a cool dick.
And I'm wondering how many of those lines were improvised.
I'm not sure, especially with Jonathan Frakes. Oh my god.
Oh.
I still think it's hilarious, okay, that one of the production designers was Kirk Thatcher. And he wrote in Star Trek 4, he wrote the punk rock song and he was the punk rocker. Okay?
That's
And
great.
then in Picard, we saw him again. We saw the punk rocker again, playing with his boombox still, playing an updated version of the song. The first song was
That's awesome.
I Hate You. The second song is I Still Hate You. Um, but it was him again. I thought that was very cool and very funny, especially when he like reaches up and like just rubs the side of his neck for a second.
Well, before we end this, we've hit the hour 42 mark. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you both and to ask questions in our chat for hyping in some questions. It's been really fun. A big thank you for letting us be a part of this game. And every week we get to come in, and Azik tries to land the ship, and the dice say, "Hell no." And
As we all try not to die this week.
so as they say, is there any spoilers you want to, or any trailers or spoiler less hints at the plot that might be coming down the pipeline for us?
Oh, well, I'd certainly say that ghosts of years past are want to haunt your every step this next mission, and that you will indeed have the opportunity to try and avoid death, but we'll see how that goes. And oh,
At least death is played by um, I can't think of it. The guy that plays Badger. Um, anyway, never mind. Go ahead.
no, I'm missing the reference there. At any rate, yeah, it is going to be a fun little spooky game that we have for this for these next couple bits of Broken Sword, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you guys like it.
Are you talking about Mark Shepard, the actor Mark Shepard?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
It took me just a second to drag that out of my brain.
And I've been watching him on Crowley on Supernatural for like
oh god, yeah.
3 or 4 seasons now. And
Yeah, I've haven't managed to watch like the last 3 seasons of that show. Like I didn't even get to see the Scooby Doo episode yet.
That was pretty good.
Okay, we're going way off base now,
Yeah.
but it is a supernatural phenomenon, and someone's going to be happy that we get to deal with that. So,
Yep.
well, I hope everybody had fun.
yeah,
Certainly.
you want to go ahead and close us out there, Mr. GM, and do your advertisements?
I will definitely do that. So yeah, this is where we are going to go ahead and close things off for the evening, and thank everybody who joined, everybody who left questions, and just generally said hello in the chat. That's great to have you on. And maybe a little ways down the line, if we are ever short a significant number of players again, and enough time has passed, we may do this again. So certainly things to look forward to. On other matters to look forward to, I would say that first, we will be back with new episodes, or the next episode of Star Trek Adventures Broken Sword next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So feel free to catch us here on Twitch. If you can't make these live on a regular basis, we have those in our YouTube archive. So just go to YouTube, look up GM and the Great Barrier, and you should be able to find complete lists of the Broken Sword episodes. There is also Star Trek Adventures Aegis. So for those of you that are more comfortable in a earlier time zone, say something more Euro friendly, we run those games at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which comes out to about 6 p.m. GMT. So if you ever want to drop in for one of those games, we run those regularly on Saturdays. We are actually about to go into part 2 of our spooky episode for this month on that show. I suspect we will be closing that out here. Otherwise, yeah, that's the basics for the Star Trek Adventures Fair we have coming up. If either of you have other streams or things that you have going on that you want to give a blurb to, or any shout outs, then by all means do so.
Okie dokie.
Yeah.
Well, hearing none,
Appreciate it.
Yeah. In that case, I think that's where we'll go ahead and cut it off then. So, I appreciate everyone stopping by, and we will see you next week. Actually, before we head out, let me see if I can send us along to anybody else. Give everybody a yes, here we go. So looks like one of my friends, speaking of doing spooky things, there's Doc BGA, who I think I'm going to send you to. He's doing some Phasmophobia if you want to take a little watch, or at least drop a kapla in the chat for him, and wish him well. But I'm going to send us off here, so you have a good night.
Gog pockets.
Oh no, Gawk pockets.
He said it.
He did say it. I take no threat for that, though.
I did have a commercial for Gawk Pockets ready to go, just in case we got into like a lull. But I'll save that for a later stream.
This stream brought to you